Christianity began as one man's execution in a provincial outpost, and somehow became the belief system of nearly a quarter of humanity today. This is the part most people get wrong about, that transformation, not because the facts are hidden, they're not, but because when you trace the actual timeline of how Christianity spread across 2,000 years, something becomes clear that changes how you understand religion, power, and human history altogether. You'll see exactly how a persecuted sect became a state apparatus. Does this interest you? Here is what we're actually looking at. The spread of Christianity wasn't primarily about faith winning converts through persuasion. It was about rulers making political decisions, and then entire populations following. In a minute, I'll show you the exact mechanism that made this happen repeatedly, across continents for centuries. It's quieter than you'd expect, but once you see the pattern, you can unsee it. Let's start where Christianity actually begins, not where mythology suggests. Around 30 AD in Judea, a Jewish teacher named Jesus is executed by crucifixion under Roman authority. His followers claim resurrection. Whether that's factually true or theologically true depends on your framework. But this part matters for history. His death doesn't end the movement. Instead, it accelerates. Within a few decades, his followers are actively teaching across the Roman Empire. Paul, originally a persecutor of Christians, becomes their most effective missionary. He's not building temples or founding institutions yet. He's writing letters. These letters become scripture. They reach communities across the Mediterranean, across trade routes, into households both wealthy and enslaved. The first Christians were urban, interconnected, and persistent. They met in homes. They didn't have political power, so they built social power instead. They took care of each other during plagues, when others fled. They offered community to the displaced and the isolated. This is important. They weren't winning through argument alone. They were winning through practice. By the early 2nd century, Christianity has taken root in most major cities of the Roman Empire. The empire notices, and what the empire notices, the empire eventually oppresses. For nearly 250 years, Christians face sporadic but brutal persecution. Some emperors tolerate them, others hunt them. The inconsistency is almost worse than constant pressure. You never know when the tolerance ends. Then something shifts. Most people think this is where a Christian emperor converts and changes everything. That's the mythology. But the actual history is more subtle and far more revealing about how power works. In 312 AD, Roman Emperor Constantine is about to fight a civil war to consolidate power. According to Christian chroniclers, he experiences a vision before the battle. A cross appears in the sky with a message in this sign: conquer. Constantine wins the battle. Whether the vision was real or politically useful doesn't change what happens next. Constantine decides to be pro-Christian, not necessarily because he's converted in any deep spiritual sense, but because Christians are now numerous, organized, and politically useful. The following year, he issues the Edict of Milan. Christianity is no longer illegal, but here's where the mechanism really appears. Constantine doesn't just legalize Christianity. He makes it attractive to be Christian. If you hold power, he gives church leaders tax exemptions. He funds basilicas. He elevates Christian clergy into positions of influence. Suddenly, being Christian is not just permitted, it's advantageous for your career, your business, your status. By 380 AD, only 50 years later, Emperor Theodosius makes Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. Not optional anymore, mandatory. If you want to participate in Roman society, you're Christian now. Notice the speed from illegal to mandatory in 50 years. This is the part that changes everything. Most people imagine Christianity spreading because the message is true or beautiful or compelling. And some of that happens, sure, but the dominant mechanism is different. If a ruler converts, his subjects convert too. not necessarily out of belief, out of practicality. You work in the government. You pray like the government prays. You want a position. You join the religion of advancement. You're a merchant who needs to sell to the empire. You adopt their gods. This isn't conscious cynicism. Usually, it's just how social systems work. Once Constantine opens the door, the flood is inevitable. Now here's the twist. The spread of Christianity through Rome reveals something about religion itself that most believers and critics both miss. Religion isn't just about what you believe, it's about who holds power and which stories support that power. Constantine needed Christianity to consolidate empire, so Christianity became imperial. Within a century, it's not the persecuted, communal faith of the first 250 years anymore. It's institutional, it's hierarchically, it's political. The medieval period shows this even more clearly. After Rome fragments into scattered kingdoms, Christianity becomes the glue holding European civilization together. But notice how Christian missionaries don't primarily convert through theology. They convert rulers. They make deals with kings. They promise spiritual legitimacy in exchange for land, resources, and authority. The conversion of an influential ruler proves a crucial strategy, often leading to the conversion of entire realms. A Germanic king accepts Christianity, and within a generation his entire kingdom is Christian. Not because they were persuaded, because authority flowed downward. Around 405 AD, Saint Jerome completes a new Latin translation of the Bible called the Vulgate. This translation matters because now the Bible exists in the language of the common person in Europe. Not just in Greek for scholars, but here is what most people miss. Jerome's translation is shaped by political and theological agendas. Translation is never neutral. Every translation choice reflects who chose it and what they wanted it to mean. But let's move to something even more revealing. In 1095, Pope Urban II calls for the First Crusade. The official reason: help the Byzantine Empire and reclaim the Holy Land from Muslim control. The real mechanism: the Pope is consolidating power. He's uniting fractured European kingdoms under a single cause. He's positioning the Church as military authority. He's selling the crusade as holy war, and nobles flock to it because it offers territory, wealth, and religious absolution, all in one package. Hundreds of thousands march toward Jerusalem. Most of them die, but Christianity expands further into the Mediterranean and the Levant. This is Christianity spreading through violence, not persuasion, and the Church blesses it. For centuries, Christian missionaries gradually move into Baltic regions, Eastern Europe, and inland Asia. Around 1294, a Franciscan missionary named John of Monte Corvino travels to China and actually establishes Christian communities in Beijing. For a brief moment, Christianity penetrates deep into Asia, but it doesn't stick without political power supporting it, without an empire backing the faith. Christianity fades from Asia. This teaches us something crucial. Christianity doesn't survive through belief alone. It survives through institutional power and political support. Then comes the Age of Discovery, and the mechanism accelerates dramatically. In 1482, a Portuguese caravel reaches the Kingdom of Congo. Portuguese explorers are establishing a foothold in Africa. Where they go, Christian missionaries follow, sometimes willingly, often by force. The Portuguese don't just trade, they colonize. And their colonization comes with a theological package. You're converting these lands to Christianity. You're saving souls. The economic extraction is wrapped in religious language. By the early 1500s, Spanish conquistadors reach the Americas. The scale of what happens next is almost unimaginable. Millions of indigenous people are forced into Christianity. Not persuaded, forced. Their religions are destroyed. Their temples are torn down and replaced with Christian churches built on the same ground. Entire civilizations are erased and replaced with a faith that comes with colonization, slavery, and conquest. Spanish conquistadors literally use the sword in one hand and the cross in the other, and the church sanctions it. The mechanism is now transparent. Christianity spreads where military power is strongest. It spreads where empires are expanding. It spreads wherever someone with weapons says it's going to spread. One of the most revealing moments in this history is the Protestant Reformation. Martin Luther, a German priest, becomes convinced that the Roman Catholic Church has become corrupt and distant from Scripture. In 1517, he publishes his critique. The Church is selling indulgences, basically forgiving sins for money. The Church is concentrating wealth and power in ways that seem antithetical to the teachings of Jesus. Luther is right about much of this, but here's what matters. Luther's Reformation doesn't happen because his ideas are better. Philosophically, it happens because the printing press exists. Luther's writings spread faster than any previous religious idea in history. And more importantly, they spread to rulers and nobles who are already resentful of papal authority. The Reformation works because it aligns with the political interests of Northern European monarchs who want independence from Rome. The Reformation isn't primarily a spiritual awakening. It's a power shift. Rome loses control of Northern Europe, new Protestant kingdoms emerge, and Christianity fragments into dozens of sects, each backed by different political powers. By the 1700s and 1800s, Europe is in the age of imperialism. Every European power is racing to colonize Africa, Asia, and the Pacific, and Christianity travels with them, not as a marginal faith, but as an integral part of the colonial apparatus. Christian missionaries establish missions in Africa, India, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific Islands. They build schools, they promote literacy, they also destroy indigenous religions, delegitimize local leadership, and pave the way for economic extraction. The missionary is often the softest form of colonization. They arrive first, they convert the population, they create cultural dependence on Europe. Then the merchants and the military arrive, and the conversion is complete. Here is where it gets real. Most of the people spreading Christianity in this era genuinely believe they're saving souls. The missionaries aren't cynical, they're believers, but they're operating within a system where Christianity serves power. They're not wrong that their faith is true. They believe it, genuinely. But they're not noticing that their faith is also useful to empires. They're spreading both genuine spiritual conviction and colonial control. Both at once. The belief is real, so is the power dynamic. By the turn of the 20th century, Christianity has spread to nearly every corner of the globe, not through theological debate, but through a combination of military conquest, missionary activity, colonial administration, and cultural coercion. There are now hundreds of millions of Christians worldwide. Then the 20th century brings a challenge that nearly breaks Christianity: communism. Communist governments in the Soviet Union, China, and Eastern Europe view Christianity as a threat to state power. They're not wrong. Christianity does offer spiritual authority that competes with state authority. So communist regimes move to suppress it. Churches are closed. Believers face persecution. In the Soviet Union, millions of Christians are killed or imprisoned. Christianity appears to be dying under communist pressure. But here's the pattern we've been watching. Christianity doesn't actually die when it loses political power. It just changes form. Underground churches emerge. Christians meet in homes, just like they did in the first century. They pass faith through families. They endure. And when communist governments fall, when that political power structure collapses, Christianity resurges. Churches reopen, millions identify as Christian again. Christianity proves more resilient than the state that tried to suppress it. This teaches us something profound about the spread of Christianity. It spreads fastest when aligned with political power, but it survives longest when operating without it. Give it military backing and it becomes imperial. Strip away that backing and it becomes communal again. Today, there are approximately 23 billion Christians worldwide. That's about 31% of the global population. Christianity is the most practiced religion on earth. The vast majority of these Christians live in countries where Christianity no longer has political power. The West is increasingly secular, increasingly skeptical of institutional religion. Christianity survived communism. It's learning to survive secularism. But notice what this 2000-year arc reveals: Christianity never spread purely on the basis of theological truth. It spread because rulers found it useful. It spread because empires needed spiritual legitimacy. It spread because missionaries combined genuine faith with colonial power. It spread because once a population was converted, the social pressure of Christianity being the dominant religion kept people Christian, whether they fully believed or not. The mechanism isn't mysterious. It's not even particularly unique to Christianity. This is how religion spread. This is how any belief system goes from marginal to dominant. Find rulers who benefit from it. Let them enforce it. Combine genuine believers with practical conformists. And repeat, most people read this history and feel one of two ways. Either they defend Christianity as true and powerful, or they criticize it as imperialist and corrupt. Both are correct. Christianity is genuinely believed by billions. It's also historically intertwined with conquest, slavery, and coercion. These aren't contradictions. They're both true simultaneously. But the last part changes everything about how we understand not just Christianity, but religion in general. If we look at the actual mechanisms of how Christianity spread, rulers converting populations, empires using it as a tool, political power driving expansion, we have to ask what part of this was inevitable because Christianity is true, and what part was inevitable because Christianity was useful to power. The answer, unsettlingly, is that we can fully separate them. A faith that genuinely offers community, meaning, and transcendence is also useful to people who want to consolidate power. A faith that genuinely calls for love and sacrifice is also usable by empires that want cultural control. The truth of the belief doesn't require the power structure, but the power structure makes the belief spread much faster. This is the insight that changes everything. Christianity didn't become the world's largest religion. Because it was the most true, it became the world's largest religion. Because it was the most true, it became the world's largest religion. Because it aligned with the interests of the most powerful people on earth for 500 years. If Islam had been allied with Constantine instead of Christianity, we'd be living in a Muslim majority world, convinced of the obvious truth of Islam, with 23 billion Muslims reading history books, wondering how their faith conquered the world. This doesn't mean Christianity is false. It means we've been reading history backward. We assume the religion that won must have been the truest or the best, but actually, it was the most useful. That's a different kind of observation entirely. Think about that. The first insight is structural power shapes belief. More than belief shapes power. Religious truth spreads fastest when allied with political authority, but it's not dependent on it. The second insight is historical. Every major expansion of Christianity coincides with a ruler's decision or an empire's conquest, not with theological argument winning people over one by one. The third insight is contemporary in the modern world, where Christianity has lost most of its political power in the West. We're seeing what Christianity looks like, untethered from empire, and it's actually smaller, more sincere, and more genuinely communal than it was during the imperial century. If you want to understand not just Christianity, but how religions actually spread through human history, how cultures shift, how ideas become dominant, how power and belief intertwine, read your religious history with this mechanism in mind. Follow the rulers, not just the theology. Follow the empire, not just the faith. The truth will become much clearer